A big hello and a warm New Zealand welcome to Grammy Award winner Rebecca St. James and her husband Cubbie Fink, who join us on the Morning Wake Up this morning. Hello, team.
Hello, hello, Bjorn and Tabs. Good to be with you guys. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it is our pleasure. Now, we've got you on to talk about your new memoir book, Lasting Ever, that is out now. People can go pick up a copy. Can you tell me the difference, first of all, just to kick off, what is the difference between a memoir and an autobiography? What qualifies as a memoir?
Well, we had to ask that same question too, because I don't think we really understood.
I don't know if we still understand
I
it.
mean, in my mind, what it is, I think that's a great question to lead with. In my mind, what it is that autobiography, you're just pretty much telling kind of the facts of how your life happened, whereas memoir is laced with, I think, truth or thing like almost a bit of teaching moments, but it not being an actual teaching book. It's kind of like this, a bit of both worlds. Yeah, that's kind of how it was explained to me.
Well, it sounds very fancy. It sounds very intellectual to write a memoir,
I'm
something like a
I'm glad we sound that way.
something maybe a president would do or something. So this
Okay, good.
this is kind of picking up, often movies get a sequel, and in some ways this is kind of a sequel to Unsung Hero, but then moving into a book format because it kind of picks up where the film Unsung Hero left off.
Yeah, it's in some ways a prequel and a sequel, and then, really introduces people to Cubbie's world as well, in a way that obviously the film Unsung Hero didn't. But I think, there was a lot of, with the movie coming out last year, August, last year, so wow, sorry, April last year. So really it's been about a year now since it came out. There has been a lot of interest in my family of origin, kind of my story, my brothers in for King and Country, their story. And I think the book, allows us to go deeper with that and like, well, what was God teaching us about his faithfulness and his goodness through these different parts of our lives and other parts that obviously, the movie didn't get to. But I love how Cub's story intertwines with mine in the book, and we found there was so many similarities with how God had taken our lives and what he taught us, and sometimes we were learning really similar things or focusing on similar things before we even knew each other, which is just cool how God was preparing us for each other and for marriage.
Well, speaking of the both of you two together, the extended title of this book is Faith, Music, Family, and Being Found by True Love. And this book kind of shares the story of how you two met. Can you give a little bit of an insight of how you two met?
You share that. He's the best at it.
Absolutely. So we were both living in Los Angeles at the time. I was there pursuing both film and music. Rebecca had moved from Nashville to LA to pursue acting and the film world. And really the group that was kind of the uniting force or factor was this philosophy group. It was a guy that opened his home and invited young people in to just chat about philosophy with the heart of laying a foundation for theology. And it was a group that I'd been a part of for a couple of years. Rebecca got introduced through a roommate of hers. When she started attending, I was actually in a season where I was just very busy with work and hadn't been in a couple of months. So I started hearing her name being thrown around by my friends and roommates, and my ears were definitely perked in regards to the way they were talking about her. And then come to find out that this Rebecca that I kept hearing about was Rebecca St. James, which I was very familiar with her name, but ironically was not familiar with her music, which I absolutely should have been. I grew up in a Christian home, listening to a ton of Christian music. We actually had her CDs in our house. And for whatever reason, when I was thumbing through the collection, I never pulled it out and put it in the CD player. But, from this perspective, I really do believe it was a form of divine protection because it really protected our first encounter.
Yeah.
It really protected kind of the foundation of our relationship because I didn't have her up on a pedestal. I wasn't a crazy stalker, which I may have turned into one had I listened to her music earlier on. But yeah, she was just a girl, and we ended up meeting at this essentially it was a wrap party for the show that I was working on at the time, and it was one of those magical movie moments where the door opened and I saw her walk through the threshold, and time seemed to slow down, and the music faded, and
Wow.
doves
special.
her hair, and the choir was singing. But really, I mean, it really was a magical moment of locking eyes from across the room. And spent most of that evening chatting, and really the rest is history.
Wow, how romantic.
Very.
Is it, you kind of touched on it there, but Rebecca, is it a bit weird trying to have a relationship when you have like a profile and you're kind of known by a lot of people? I imagine it must be sort of a bit odd to then try and, when people already know a lot about you and you're meeting other people. Is that a hard road to sort of navigate?
Yeah, it is. I think, there's so much that is great about being able to do music, but there's also a side of it that feels a bit isolating or a bit lonely sometimes. And I think I had guys that were hesitant to really step up and into the relationship when they were dating me because they were a bit intimidated by what I did. And so Cub was different. Like there was just an instant kind of rapport and respect and courage that he had, like an innate sense of security as a man. Like he was just very confident and grounded in who he was. And that was new for me. I think I'd maybe dated some guys that felt insecure again because of what I did. So it was very attractive. I liked him right away. It didn't take but 2 seconds to go, I like this guy.
Yeah. That's a very special that you guys found each other. Rebecca,
Yes.
the book also kind of covers you talking about burnout after being in the music industry for so long. Can you talk about what that felt like and what your journey has been since experiencing burnout?
Yeah, thank you for asking great questions, you guys. You asked the different ones, which we really like.
Oh, good.
You're excellent at what you do. I think it was really hard. I think how I described it was, it felt like I was an emotional anorexic in a way. Like it was just, I had been functioning still, like but it had been eating into my own personhood for so long. I'd probably been to varying degrees of burnt out, for 10 years at that point, and just exhausted and depleted. And so it had eaten into me mentally, emotionally, somewhat spiritually, although I believed everything that I was still, singing and saying. It was still, my heart for Jesus had remained intact, but I just felt like I didn't have much left. So even when I met him, at 32, I remember feeling like, what do I even have to offer this guy? Like, because I just feel like a bit of a shell of a human and, just skin on bones, that kind of idea. And so thankfully Cub saw, who I was and the heart of me. And I think, we're 14 years in now, and it's almost been this kind of rebuilding of confidence. I look back at pictures even from when we were dating or early married, and I see a different person. And I'm just so thankful that God brought my best friend and soulmate and that he redeemed that part of my story, because my dream my whole life was to be married and have a family. And so it's just beautiful how he made those dreams come true.
I imagine writing out your story is quite a cathartic process. When you look back, there must be a lot of highs, and you reflect on memories and you treasure those. But I'm sure there's parts that are really difficult to maybe revisit. What was probably the most challenging part of the book to write or share or go into for you guys looking back?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely was far more therapeutic and cathartic than I would have anticipated. And it really is a beautiful process to be forced to reflect on your life to that degree. And it's something that I've encouraged people to do ever since taking the time to do it. I mean, even if it's just for a moment, just to reflect and see God's hand in the midst of your story. Because often we miss it, especially in the midst of the hard times. We miss the way God is invested in every detail of our lives. But yeah, I mean, we had made the choice to go to some pretty deep places. I mean, it would have been easy to fill the pages with all the good, and there is a lot of good there. But I think the uniting factor that we can share with whoever's going to read the book is the pain. That's the point that unites all of us as humans, is because it's the thing that we all experience. And we felt like we needed to be real about the pain that we've walked through, and I chose to tell some stories that I have never told before in regards to some trauma that I experienced as a child. And prior to putting the book out, it was really something that I'd only shared with 2 or 3 people in my life, some of my closest friends and family. And it was something that I wrestled with, whether or not I was going to be, that vulnerable and share those stories. But I felt like it was important to share, because of the healing and freedom I've experienced on the other side of the pain, because of what I've experienced through offering that pain Jesus and seeing his healing hand at work in my life, and how my life has literally been revolutionized by facing the trauma and walking through counseling to uproot it and deal with it and hand it over, and being open to share that. My hope is that it would give other people courage to face the hard things in their life.
Cubbie, do you find it still quite vulnerable though now that it's actually out? Like, you obviously put a lot of thought into deciding to share that, but now that it's actually out, how have you handled that emotionally?
I don't know if I've fully wrapped my head around the reality that it is out and that people have read it and are reading it. It's a strange process for sure, because you spend months, and in our case close to a year, putting these words onto a page with this strange idea that someday someone's going to read these words. But now that people are actually reading them, it's a wild process. And I feel like there has been a new kind of found almost calling and confidence in stepping into that, my desire to encourage people to do the same, and to share and to be vulnerable, because it's when we keep our secrets in the dark, that's when the enemy has the victory. When we bring them into the light, it allows the Lord to have the victory. And so bringing these stories into the light has been a very healing process.
Yeah, I'm proud of him for doing that.
Feedback from family members? Do you have to run stuff past other people that feature in stories and be like, hey, I'm going to be mentioning something from, and you were there. Are you okay with that? Or, I mean, do you have to run that by a lot of people when you're kind of, writing a story and getting permissions for things like that?
So my mom kind of led the way on this, and she was advised when she was writing her memoir that came out a couple of years ago, and it was really our family story, and was a bit of a precursor actually to Unsung Hero Even Happening, was her book Behind the Lights. And she was advised by the writer that worked with her to not ask families opinions on what should or shouldn't be in the book, or if they were okay with that. That's how they remember it or whatever, because it just creates almost like conflict. And it's like, this is your memoir. This is like how you remember it. This is how it was for you. And you've got to just kind of stick with that and own to that. And so I think with us, we were just like, we want to be honoring to people, and we want to be, like respectful always in what we say, and in what we say in the book and what we share about people in our lives. But we didn't go around really getting any consensus.
I like it.
I think my parents have read it. I don't know that we've even handed it out to siblings yet. Oh yeah, probably Joel and Luke, because they advocated. Well, they advocated for the book publicly, so we gave them one. But the rest of the family, maybe they haven't even got one yet. Yeah, should probably work on that.
Well, I'm super excited to read it because your mum's book made me cry my eyes out one of the pages. So I'm looking forward to reading this one.
Oh, good. Thanks.
My voice has completely left me, so I can't even wrap up the interview. But thank you guys so much for sharing and being vulnerable about your story and putting pen to paper, and now being able to share and bless other people with that story as well. So just lastly, for anyone that's tuned in and interested, who have you written the book for, and what are you hoping that people take away from it if they do pick up a copy?
I think it's really for all the way from probably single people that, want to get married one day, and they're kind of looking towards that. I've found that it's been really encouraging to people in that season of life, that are, parenting right now. We talk a bit about parenting and a bit about marriage, and all the way through to people that like loved Christian music in the 90s and kind of want to like reflect on how that was for them, and it's nostalgic. Cub has a really great thing to say about like what you wanted and what we wanted really when people close the book, what we want them to take away.
Yeah, I mean, as we approached kind of the final chapters and final pages, and when we finally closed the book on the edit, when I stepped away and just reflected on the stories that we collected, my overwhelming sense was God is so good. It wasn't something, it's almost like I can't even take credit for the stories that are in this book, because God's fingerprints are just so unbelievably all over them. And it's just so God orchestrated, and I think that is what we hope people will walk away with reading this book. It's a book that I wish I had when I was walking through my kind of crisis of faith in high school. It's a book that wish I would have read or had to read when I was, longing to be married. So I kind of wrote to those seasons of my life, and I really feel like it's a book that's a fun read, but it's also a very encouraging read. Or at least that's our hope.
Yeah, and we hope that people apply it to their own life, that like God is good and he is faithful, and that he will be good and faithful in their own story as well.
Well, the book is the new memoir, Lasting Ever, Faith, Music, Family, and Being Found by True Love. Rebecca St. James, Cubbie Fink, thank you so much for sharing your story and being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
It's been a
thanks,
joy to
Derek.
be with you.